You are listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
The chasers of light, to the purveyors of pictures, to all of you listening from around the world, this is the F11 Photography Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Deal, and today's podcast is going to be an audio-only podcast. So, we are going to be talking today about the Fuji X100VI. Brandon's not in today. He has the day off because this is an audio-only podcast. For those of you who aren't familiar with this show, this is a show. And so we do this show a couple times a week. Sometimes we'll do a video podcast, and sometimes we'll do an audio podcast. And today is the audio podcast. And so if you're discovering us on YouTube, if you see a nice colorful thumbnail, that's usually a video podcast. If you see a clean white thumbnail with the Apple and Spotify logo on it, that is an audio-only podcast. So now that we got that out of the way, if you discovered this channel and you like it, I highly encourage you to click the subscribe button below. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, all other major podcast platforms, welcome back and thank you. I do want to talk about something. I did have somebody in one of the comments of one of our previous episodes get upset because we had a sponsor. The second we went into the sponsor, they got triggered and they left a comment. And I just want to say that this is a show. And we have sponsors. And one of the reasons that we do have sponsors is because I don't want to do like a Patreon setup. I don't want to beg you, the listeners, or people who stare at the thumbnails or view the videos for money. I just don't want to do that. I don't feel like this tip system is I'm not cut out for tips, man. Like, hey, leave me a tip, buy me a cup of coffee. How about I just have Luminar Neo sponsor us, and then you sit there for 30 seconds and you listen, or you grab the slider and you move past the ad. I don't care what you do. Doesn't negatively impact me either way, but we like to have sponsors because it allows us to keep doing this show, and there are a lot of you who subscribe to the show, who watch the show, and we thank you for that. But I guess I have to say this every episode, which is YouTube was invented in 2005. And you just grab the slider and you move it forward just a little bit, and then whatever you didn't want to listen to is no longer there because you've gone forward in time. You know, you got into that DeLorean and you went forward 30 seconds. Thanks to Doc Brown. So yeah, you got that bitch up to 88 miles an hour. You moved that slider. You moved on with your life. Not that hard, right? Oddly enough, it does take longer to type a comment saying that you don't like the fact that we have ads than it does to just skip the ad itself. Food for thought. And now, our sponsor.
Harness the power of artificial intelligence with Luminar Neo. Artificial intelligence is the buzzword in the photography industry right now. It's becoming so widely used in our industry, it's hard to tell when it's hype and when it's actually an effective tool. Luminar Neo actually uses AI for good by giving you easy-to-use modules that are powerful and improve your photography. And now they're happy to announce the introduction of Generace, which is their generative AI fill. What is Generace? It's a smart personal assistant that will help you remove unwanted distractions from your image. Unlike a standard erase tool, it leverages the power of AI to fill the gaps with textures and other elements to match the surrounding area. You'll easily get realistic results because Generace is analyzing your photographs to make sure that the results look realistic, mimicking patterns and objects that it sees. In addition to other powerful modules like relight, power line removal, and AI masking, Luminar Neo is on the cutting edge of artificial intelligence, but it's not just a plugin for Photoshop. You can actually use it as a standalone program with a catalog organizer and all that. It also has presets. Use the code Kevin10 at checkout or check out the link in this podcast to get 10% off your copy of Luminar Neo today.
This is Jason Berkman, and you're listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
All right, I am back, and I want to talk to you about the subject today, which is the Fuji X100VI. Interestingly enough, our sponsor, Luminar Neo, worked in conjunction with Fuji, and they were doing photo walks all over the United States. I went to the WPPI show in Las Vegas. I linked up with Luminar and Fuji there and found out about this photo walk. So I actually got to hang out with both companies here in Austin, which was really cool. And we went around and walked around, and I had the 106 as well as one of their, influencers, because it is a camera that is marketed toward influencers. And interestingly enough, I took my X100VI with me on a photo shoot. I was shooting for a designer in my studio, and I brought this camera along because I wanted to test some stuff out, because I am doing my initial impressions review on my YouTube channel, which is just Kevin Deal Photography. If you're not familiar with my YouTube channel, go check it out. I highly encourage it. And interestingly enough, the makeup artist saw me pull my X100VI out, and she was like, "Oh, you have one of those." And I was just like, like what? Usually, usually a makeup artist isn't somebody who remarks a specific model of camera, but she knew exactly which model of camera I had, the X100VI. And I was just like, "You know about this camera?" She's like, yeah, influencers are using it everywhere. And, this is kind of interesting to me because I'm an interchangeable lens guy. I shoot on both digital and film. I shoot on Canon and Fuji. And then in the film world, I shoot on Mamiya and Hasselblad. And so I've been really oblivious to the whole X100 world. I am a street photographer though. And as I've gotten older, I like things to be a little smaller and more compact. And so I was eyeing the X100V or 5 when it was out. And I never, of course, got a hold of one. I was like many other people. I never got one. And so it was always on my radar, and I started looking at the the XE4, trying my hand out at maybe like, I'll get like an XE4 and like a 23 f2.8 or 27 f2.8, whatever the heck it's called. I was trying to make an X100 type of system out of something else. I really did want to get a smaller camera, a Fuji camera. I mean, I have an X-T20, but I converted it to full spectrum infrared. And so while the size of that X-T20 would be nice to go along with maybe a pancake lens, I would be nice to have an all-in-one, just kind of shoot at my favorite focal length, which in Fuji and crop is 23 millimeters. So the X100 really is, on paper, looked like exactly what I wanted. And so I finally got one at midnight. The day of the release, I saw the B&H thing. I went ahead and said, buy it. And it came in just in time for WPPI. So I did have an episode where we talked about the specs and what I anticipated and all that, but I hadn't actually shot on it yet, and I hadn't actually confirmed that I was going to get the camera in time and that it was going to ship in time. It quickly went from on order to a pre-order, and then it went to a new order status. And then on that Wednesday, I believe, February 28th was the launch date on it. I looked at my B&H account, and sure enough, it switched from new order to shipping, and I got tracking, and it showed up on that Friday before I went to Las Vegas. I departed for Las Vegas on Sunday, and so yeah, I ended up getting the camera, and I went on a very quick street walk in Austin because I just wanted to acclimate. And by the way, I've never used an X100 before, so I'm not doing this podcast from the standpoint of somebody who's an expert on it. So, if you're an X100 person, you may not learn much today. But I went ahead and started messing around with it. And, I am familiar with Fuji, but there were some things that took some getting used to with it. Finding video mode was a hell of a time. There were some things there where it's like I guess you have to go to drive mode to go to video mode, which was a little interesting. Took some getting used to. I actually had to read the damn manual, which imagine that. So yes, I actually read a manual for once because I kept going, how do I do this? How do I do that? But the camera, I love the feel of it. It's really nice. Looks like between this model and the previous models, the screen articulates a little bit more. Now it tilts down a little bit. It's not a flippy screen, so you can't use this as a selfie camera. But I got it for street photography. I immediately went out and ordered a hood for it and a Pro Mist filter, an 8th Pro Mist filter. I wanted to check out this camera the way a lot of other people check out this camera and use this camera. I guess they want it to look a little bit more film-like, to where those highlights are a little more tame. So I went ahead and I decided to do the lifestyle, so to speak. And I wanted to shoot this the way apparently everybody else does. It's cool, I guess. The filter thing is cool. I took it to Las Vegas, arrived at the WPPI show. Didn't see a lot of people with these, which means that I guess if you got in on the first batch, like I did, you're fortunate. I don't know how many were in the first batch. I just know that a lot of people right now are not getting theirs for a while. There's a lot of freaking out and anticipation and stuff like that. So I consider myself to be lucky, for sure. The build quality on it, I like it. I think it's very well built. If it's anything like my previous Fuji cameras, I do worry about long-term, about maybe the corners wearing, stuff like that. So when I was at WPPI, I actually went by the Nomadic booth and purchased, I purchased it online. They didn't have stuff for sale there, but I went by the Nomadic booth. Kyle was a super big help, and I ended up ordering a really cool sling bag to keep this in. And so I've been keeping in that. I've been very happy with it. My initial impressions of it is that it takes a little bit of getting used to. I went ahead and took it on the Strip. I walked around the Strip, took pictures of all the characters there, went around the Venetian, around the Mirage area. Took a lot of pictures with it, and I love it. I did some comparisons between this X100VI, and I also brought along my XH2, and I put the 23-1.4 on there. And something that immediately stood out to me about this camera is that it's pretty sharp. The lens is pretty good on it. It compared pretty favorably to my XH2, the files. Now, I will say that the XH2, in my opinion, if you start pixel peeping, is a tiny bit better, but like marginal, like very ever so slightly better, which would make sense because I'm using a much bigger piece of glass on it with that 23-1.4. I don't know if I accidentally said 1.2 earlier. If I did, my apologies, but 1.4, that's what it is a 23-1.4. It's the Fuji, the native one. My favorite lens, actually. So, because I already stated it's my favorite focal length, which is why I was attracted to this camera. So, had a great time on the Strip with this camera. Immediately fell in love with the internal ND filters. I gotta say, I wish every camera manufacturer would do that. I'm jealous now when I have my R5 or I'm shooting with my GFX 100S, that I can't just hit a button and then all of a sudden it's 4 stops darker, where I found that to be super helpful during the day when I was shooting street photography is, at 2 p.m., you're in the shade and then you're in like direct sunlight. And I found that as I would transition from direct sunlight to shade, if I just hit the button on the back, because I did program my rear command dial to be my ND filter, I would just hit that, and then I would be pretty close within a stop of my exposure in that transition from shadow to bright light and back. And so I found that to be a great help. Additionally, my style of street photography that I like to shoot, I love to freeze a scene but blur motion. That's just something that appeals to me. I'm obviously not original there because a lot of street photographers do that, but that is the style that appeals to me. Is I love, if a car is whizzing by, to freeze my scene but have a car whizzing by, and the ND filters allow me to do that. And I'm super excited about that feature because I think that feature is going to get used all the time, and it was used all the time in Las Vegas. I also was super excited about the IBIS. And for those of you in the X100 world who maybe ordered this camera, or if you are new to IBIS in general, like I shouldn't say those of you in the X100 world, but maybe those of you who have never had a camera that has IBIS before. A word of warning: cameras with IBIS shake, especially when they're turned off. So if you get this X100VI and you're walking around with it and you hear something shaking in it, no, it's not that cheap quality of the fact that it's made in China, which, by the way, I think this thing is built incredibly well. So you could have told me it was built in Japan, and I would have believed you, because it seems like it's built really well. But if it shakes, that is the camera doing its job. That is IBIS. So do not freak out. Maybe you're somebody who's been part of the whole X100 life, and this is your, you get this camera and you've never had a camera with IBIS, and all of a sudden you're like, what's up with that? It's just the IBIS. So wanted to get that out of the way, but the IBIS was really awesome. So I went to, after I got done testing out stuff in the strip, I wanted to go do a test of the low light capabilities because, the maximum aperture on it is f2, and ISO gets up to 12,800 and all that. So I was like, all right, I'm going to take this guy to Fremont Street, because if you've ever been to Las Vegas, that's where all the characters are. They've got some pretty, crazy street performers. There's a guy in a gorilla costume, like dancing around, an oversized gorilla costume. And boy, the drunk people love that guy. And that's going to be on my my YouTube video of my initial impressions review that I'll do on my YouTube channel, my other YouTube channel. But when I was near the Golden Nugget Casino, I was like, well, I wonder how long I can handhold a shot with IBIS. And of course, you've got those lights, those big casino lights that are blaring. So I went ahead and I turned on my ND filter with it. And I was able to legitimately hold a shot for a second, a full second. Now, that's not with a high hit rate. It was probably like 1 in 8. I would get sharp. But to be able to handhold a shot for a second, that's pretty awesome. And I was able to pull that off with the bright lights. I don't know how it would work well in a situation where the lights aren't as bright. I don't know. I had to test that out. But at a half a second, no problem. I could make it look like I was on a tripod. That's how good it was. Now, I will say the handheld second shots, if you zoomed into 100% on those fine line transitions you normally see, ever so slightly, there was some shake. But when you zoom out to, Instagram viewing size, it looks sharp. Like you have to really pixel peep to see that there's ever so slightly some motion. And I thought that was fantastic. Now, obviously, you have the ND filters built into the previous model, so that's not revolutionary. But the IBIS, that I would imagine that you probably couldn't get a full second out of those older models. Now, I haven't tried them, but I don't see how you could. We typically can't handhold something longer than a 30th or a 60th of a second, roughly at a 35 millimeter equivalent focal length, maybe a 20th of a second with that. But so that was fun. I had a lot of fun shooting on Fremont Street. I also shot a little bit of video with it. And interestingly enough, I was shooting on my Canon R5, recording. I had my wife record me on the R5, and she remarked, because I also was testing out the Canon RF 28 millimeter f2.8 for that review as well. I was doing 2 reviews at once, and she said she had an easier time recording me on the X100VI because she just thought that the screen looked easier. It was easier to, I'm sorry, she thought that the screen was easier to view than versus the Canon. So it wasn't even just the ease of use and the fact that the camera's small, but she just said that it looked better. So that was interesting because she's not a photographer, she's not a videographer, and sometimes that's the best feedback you should get is, what does somebody who really doesn't know a lot about this think about it? Because that's the most obvious answer, usually the one that's right in front of you. And so she remarked that it was easier to video record on that. And so, and I agree with her. Like, it's really a really beautiful color screen and all that. I really liked it. Also, very discreet, which is why I wanted it. I wanted a discreet camera. And this was proven because my wife and I purchased tickets to the Neon Museum. And, they're like $50. I can't remember if it was $25 or $50 a piece. It wasn't cheap. And then you like get in there and they're like, oh, you can't take pictures. And I'm like, man, everybody has an iPhone. And, iPhone's like a 20 megapixel sensor, and they're starting to do better. They have the HEIF where it can like stack the pictures and all that. So for viewing stuff on a 2x3 phone screen, an iPhone can take a very good picture. I think we can all agree on that. Now, in super low lighting, that's where your cameras kick in, right? That's where our tools kick in, is that like you can take better pictures with that. You can obviously control your image better than that because you're a photographer, you're a pro, you know what you're doing. But I was pretty pissed off that I couldn't use the X100VI in the Neon Museum, but I did anyway because it was so discreet. It was so, stowed away. It was in my hoodie. I could just walk around and pop it out and take pictures, and nobody really said anything, and because it's the size of a phone. But if I had my R5 or even my XH2 there, you can bet your ass that they would have been all over me and be like, hey, you got to put that away. Now, at one point in time, I did, like when we were at the end of the museum, I was just like, there's like a neon light right in the entrance, and I just walked up to it. It wasn't even like on the main path of the Neon Museum. I busted my camera out to take a picture of that, and a staff member did say, hey, you need to put your camera away. And it's a stupid policy. Like, it's a donation museum, and it's like, hey, rather than like being an asshole and telling me to put my camera away when everybody's taking pictures and posting them on social media straight from their effing phones, like, it's a nonprofit thing. I'll donate $10 to the thing, to the cause, and just let me take pictures and get out of my way. Because you can't tell, like, these people aren't going to be able to tell the difference between something that's shot on an X100VI and a phone. They're just not. Like, in the context, if they see like a post on Facebook or something like that, obviously, if we take something into Capture One or we take something into Lightroom, we look at it, you can tell if something was taken on a nicer camera with nicer optics and all that. But in the grand scheme of things, nobody's going to know. So I was kind of pissed off about that. And, I went ahead and just like, whatever, I'm going to take pictures with it anyway, because I spent money on it. And the X100 did a fantastic job. Now, something that isn't, I think, all models of the X100s, but something that really stood out to me that I loved is I do love that hybrid viewfinder. So we concluded everything in Las Vegas, went by the Fuji booth, like I said, had a great time with them, talked to them. I think film simulations are going to be coming out in more frequency. Now I think they're going to go all in on film simulations. This is not some rumor that I want to start or whatnot. I just was talking to Fuji at their booth and having a really candid conversation with them about things. It's like, hey, let's talk about, the future of the company. It wasn't an interview. We were just chatting, talking about what we loved about Fuji and all that. And they kind of hinted that, Fuji's going to go all in on film simulations, which is great because I'd love to see Pro 400H and some other stuff come down the pipeline. I think that would be awesome. That also kind of, in my opinion, gives a little bit more relevance to the rumor that all the Generation 5 Fuji cameras are going to get the Reala Ace, I think, possibly. That's a rumor, but it kind of like the rumors I think, I don't want to say confirmed, but definitely has more legs now after my personal conversation with Fuji. But Vegas was a good time. I had an awesome time with it. There's really not a lot of cities, in my opinion, to shoot street photography better than Vegas, right? I mean, you could do New York City, you could do Hong Kong, places like that, Tokyo. There are some awesome cities for street photography, but I think Vegas is a really great city for street photography. But I didn't just test it on that. I brought it back to Texas. I drove all the way to the Mexican border to a small town called Roma, which is in Texas. It's on the Texas side of the Mexican border because, after all, this is a camera for those who just want to go on an adventure and have a really great companion to document that adventure. So I wanted to use it in that capacity. So I drove to a border town, that border town of Roma, and it's about 5.5 hours south of Austin. 330 miles, 1,500 miles away from Vegas. So very, very far away. I've already been traveling a lot with this camera. And I went to this old town. I went to a distillery. I bought some Texas agave because you cannot call it mezcal or tequila because it's not grown in those regions. It's kind of like you can't call champagne unless it's grown in that region, right, for wine. So, but there's a beautiful historic old Texas town with a mixture of Mexican and German architecture together. Took a lot of beautiful shots of historic buildings. Really gave me a chance to bust out that Fuji Eterna bleach bypass, which, by the way, I am a lover of that film simulation. I know a lot of people don't get it. I think it's gorgeous. I love shooting with it, especially old weathered buildings. I think that's what it was made for. Had a great time with it. Documented, some Border Patrol boats going by and stuff just because I was like, hey, I'm here. I might as well test it out for the photojournalistic aspect of it. And it did a good job there. And then I drove it back all the way to Austin. I would just pull over. I would turn on the... another great feature, another great time to talk about those awesome ND filters would be I just find a really cool intersection on an old dusty highway, in the valley of Texas, and I'd pull over and I'd wait for a semi truck to go by, and with that ND filter engaged, I would slow the shutter speed down to a 15th of a second because I could, and have it at f8 at 2 p.m. middle of the day, and a semi truck would go by and I just get this really badass sharp stop sign with a beautiful blue sky and just a blurry gas tanker semi truck going by, and it made for really cool photos. Just another reason why I love this camera. Can you go out and get any camera and put frontal ND filters on it? Of course you can, but just hitting a button, man, that is so sweet. And then that also gave me an opportunity to further test out that hybrid viewfinder because it's kind of interesting. It's like, hey, I forgot what it's like to look at images in real time, because you do have a couple millisecond round trip latency when you're using that electronic viewfinder. And I've been using an electronic viewfinder now for half a decade, and my brain has gotten used to it. It's gotten comfortable with simulating my exposure and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool. And so, being able to hit that hybrid viewfinder, you can, see your exposure and then flip it back, and then you can get back to storytelling, right? Because it's like, hey, a story is unfolding here and I can see outside of my frame, and I'm waiting and anticipating for whatever it is to go into my frame, and I'm going to hit the shutter release at that specific time. And it did that. And so I love that aspect of the camera. You know, like this is something I'm getting excited about because I'm new to the X100 series. A lot of people who be listening to this who have been on the X100 series are like, "Yeah, old news, dude. We know." So, but I love the camera so far. The flash has been a pleasure to deal with. It's kind of nice to have a built-in flash sometimes. You know, I'm not a big fan of Fuji's menu system, but that's a gripe about the system in general. I just think that they're cumbersome. You know, you have 6 pages. Sometimes you have to scroll down. You don't have a touch screen. I would love to see Fuji just like hit the reset button on their menus and start over. Canon does it right. You can touch the menus with your fingers and get to where you need to get to faster. You never go below the page. It's like whatever's on the page you see, and then you move right, you move laterally. So all in all, my first impressions of the camera are that it is fantastic. I love it. And, you know, to me, does the camera have like these magical, mystical powers? No. It does not. Like, you can take just as good of pictures with other cameras. To me, it's a camera of convenience. This is not a camera that, like, I really honestly am struggling to find people that I would recommend this camera to as it being their only camera. Now, there are people who obviously hotly disagree with me on this. There's, you know, content creators, influencers, people who love this camera. To me, if I were a street photographer, this would be a good first camera for me for street photography. But if I were primarily a street photographer, I'm not going to lie, I'd probably own a Leica just because they are, in my opinion, that much better, especially like a monochrome only because I love shooting monochrome. So, you know, you can make the argument that this would be a good first camera for a street photographer, despite the fact that, like I said, it'd probably lean a little more toward Leica. But I mean, I don't think it's a good camera for a beginner. I really don't. I've kind of seen an angle. A lot of people buy this as their first camera, and I can't say I recommend it. Now, from the standpoint of shooting at 23 millimeters, I can see that being a good positive thing. Like, hey, learn how to shoot on a fixed focal length. It'll teach you a lot about photography. I do agree with that. And I do agree that in Fuji, 23 millimeters or in full frame, 35 millimeters is a great, perfect first focal length to do that with. But, you know, this camera, it's a lot like a lot of cameras out there. In capable hands, it is a really awesome tool. And I absolutely agree with that assessment on it, is that, you know, for it's like a photographer's camera, right? To me, like somebody who really knows their exposure triangle, knows when to maybe put their ISO into auto and then take it out. You know, the fact that you got that hybrid viewfinder for anticipating things. Like, I really do think that, like, this is a powerful tool for capable photographers. You know, you put it in all auto mode, can it do some pretty good things? Yeah, but I think there's way better cameras out there that'll do that. Like, I could give somebody a Canon R8 with a 35 millimeter lens on it, and it's about the same price as this. And in terms of things like autofocus, being more accurate, the auto modes, in my opinion, being better, the Canon, in my opinion, is a far superior camera to this camera. Now, this camera has the film simulations, but there's other Fuji cameras that have film simulations. As a matter of fact, all of them do. So, I don't know. It's interesting. I do think that this camera is overhyped, despite the fact that I love it. But it's not my first camera. It's not even my second camera. This is just like my street photography and my vacation camera, and I want to take good pictures with it. And I have capable hands. I know how to use it. So for me, it's a good buy. But I don't necessarily think it's a good buy for everybody. I think that there's a lot of people out there who will buy this camera because of the hype behind it. And if they really did their research, it might not even be a top 5 camera for them for what they actually need the camera for. That's just my assessment on it. But the market disagrees with me because these things are so backordered right now. I've seen reports of these things being backordered until like June. People freaking out, canceling their orders, changing the colors to see if maybe the other color would come in sooner. Like, just people making really, in my opinion, stupid decisions, like really dumb decisions with their hearts instead of their brains. Like, I am lucky. Like, like I said, I laid in bed. I hit the refresh button. I saw that the silver one was available, which, by the way, I did go with the hipster silver. And I ordered it, and it came in like within a week. I had it in my hands. So, I don't know what to say for those of you who can't get a hold of them. I do have a message for people who bought several of them and are deciding to resell them, which is you are scum. You're a terrible person, and you're delaying an experience for somebody who could have one of these in their hands right now. I could sell mine for a healthy profit right now. I paid regular price for it. I'm assuming I can make $600 to $1,000 if I really wanted to, reselling it. But I actually bought the camera because to me, I feel like I am a target market for this camera for my street photography and my travel photography and the way I like to shoot. I think that this camera, I don't know if I necessarily say it's a niche camera, but maybe it is, but I happen to fall under that niche for it. And so I have absolutely no plans to get rid of my X100VI. But I'm disappointed, that people are just trying to make a quick buck off of it. It is their right. They are allowed to do it. But, after what happened with the 5, the V, and the fact that they just had to discontinue it and launch it, I don't know. It kind of sucks because it's creating this like panic market, and a lot of people are stressed and they have anxiety about it. And any one person we could help get these cameras into their hands, I think would be a good thing, right? And then I think that dealers, I've been seeing a lot of communication. I'm in some Fuji groups, and I've been seeing that the communication between the dealers has been vague. So who knows what's going on behind the scenes, but I do feel like this is a tad of a shit show once again. I don't think it's not going to be as bad as the V, because they can make it, but they're just, they don't have the ability to keep up with demand again. And that really sucks. So I'm not happy about that. And I do hope that a lot of you get your cameras soon who order them, because it is a fantastic camera. But I gotta say, I do think that this is a bit of an overhyped camera. It is a cool camera, and I love mine, and I have no intention of getting rid of it. But I do think that a lot of the people who are getting hyped about this camera, like I said, I don't think it's like the first camera that they should buy if they don't already have another camera. I think this is a really awesome second camera for people, for the most part. For me, it's like my really awesome third or fourth camera, because I have an addiction. I collect cameras, and so it is what it is. But with that, I just wanted to kind of let you know, hey, my experiences so far with it have been really positive. I really do like the camera. There haven't been a lot of things that have annoyed me about the camera. I really can't think of a ton of them. I will say that putting on the screw mounts with a third-party lens hood and all that, I guess I got my signals crossed and I did something backwards. And I guess I put one of the screw filters on backwards or something like that, one of the rings. And all of a sudden, I heard a grinding sound, and it said that the focusing system wasn't working. And I was like, oh, crap. And I immediately, like within a second, I was like, I clearly installed this backwards. So I guess the screws work on both sides. So just be careful if you're new to the X100 system and you go out and you buy like a third-party screw system for your filters and your lens hood and all that, because if you do accidentally put the rings on backwards and you hear a grinding sound and you see your camera freaking out about focusing, just immediately turn it off, flip it the other way, and you're good to go. Like I said earlier, I wasn't a big fan of the fact that I had to go to drive delete in order to find video mode. I think it would be cool to have just kind of a quick switch. It's funny, I went to the Fuji booth at WPPI and asked them about how to focus in video mode, because the manual wasn't very well written on it, and the guy at the booth actually couldn't help me, so I figured it out on my own. It wasn't that hard, but shooting video on it at first was a little bit confusing to me, but I finally figured it out. So just take your time with it. It's a cool camera. It's also one other thing I want to talk about with it. It was very customizable. At first, when I saw it, I was a little intimidated. I was like, where are all my buttons at, And I'm not a huge fan of Fuji's touchscreens, but in order for me to set this camera up the way I needed to, I had to turn the touchscreen on and do the swipe gestures, up, down, left, right, BA, select, start. If you are a Contra person, you'll get that joke. But I had to assign some things to the swipes on there because otherwise I wouldn't have had enough customizable buttons to do everything that I wanted to do. You don't have to use this camera like with the tactile dials and all that. You can actually just use the dial in the front and the back and use it kind of more like a PASM camera and program shutter speed and aperture to be on the dials if you really want to. So you can use this camera the way you want to. It is a powerful camera, but like I said, little overrated. I'm not going to lie. Just keep that in mind. But hopefully... my experiences I'm reporting back to you will help some of you along, get you a little excited, get you a little jealous, whatever. I apologize if it makes you jealous. But I do love the camera, and do look for my review, which is coming up. I'm going to hopefully have it out by the end of the month. I'm still editing. I'm done with the Vegas part. I got to move on to the Mexico part. And then also, I guess... forgot to mention, autofocus on it has been pretty good overall. I did a editorial shoot with a model today on it, and it was fantastic. It did a good job. I didn't miss focus too often, not any more than any other Fuji camera I own. But that's really it. I just wanted to talk about my initial impressions. This is not a long-term review. This is not a full review. And thank you to all of you who stuck around and listened to today's episode. That does it for today's episode. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening today. F11pod.com is where you can find us. You can also find us at the extension at F11pod. I want to thank our sponsor, Luminar Neo. I want to thank all of you who listen to us on Apple, Spotify. If you could, click the subscribe button below. I would greatly appreciate it. And until next time, chase light and not algorithms.
Thank you for listening to today's episode.
For more information about this podcast, go to www.f11pod.com.